The trick is doing life all the time, even when you feel triggered, you feel not good enough, you feel all these things. But it doesn't define who you are, because whatever is going on doesn't define who you are, because things happen. Your soul team, your angels, your higher self, your higher power is all working, even though you feel like you're not doing anything. But that's part of the process, because there's things happening behind the scenes that you're not seeing. And that's the beauty of it. When you realize that things are happening that you're not aware of, it just makes you realize that it's all going to happen the way it needs to happen. And people will say things or do things that you don't like. And you're like, okay, that doesn't feel good. I don't like that. But what they said doesn't define who I am. And it doesn't define who I was. So they're going to call you names or say things about you in front of you. But at the end of the day, you don't have to believe that's true. Because somebody will say something like, you're dumb. Or you're incompetent or something. And that could be their perception of what you are transmuting, or that's how they feel about themselves. So when you live in the understanding of people will say things or they'll do things, it just defines how they are. So when somebody says, oh, you're blah, 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 you fill in the blank. You're like, okay, let me think about that for a minute. It's not true. It's what they think about me. Or it's the perception that they have about themselves, and they're just transmuting it out into the world because they're unhappy with their life, or they're unhappy with what's going on, or they're just unhappy with everything. So if they say stuff because they want to get a rise out of you, because they don't know what else to do, it just makes you think, okay, this person needs to reflect on me, which when I mean me, themselves, because people will say stuff like you're annoying, or you're dumb, or I don't like you, or blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, so they say you're annoying. The reason is they're annoyed with themselves, and they're just projecting things onto you because they don't want to deal with themselves, or They don't know how to process their emotions. So when you get to a point where you're like, okay, you're welcome. Get to a point where people will say stuff and you're like, okay, let me process that a minute. This person thinks I'm dumb. Okay. The reasoning that they said that they think I'm dumb is because they think they're superiorly more intelligent than me, or it's an idea that they have in their own mind that nobody is smart like me, everybody's dumb. So they're just projecting what they believe or what they were shown as a child. So when you get to a point where you're like, people are going to hate me, people are going to talk shit about me, people are going to say things to me because they're like, I want your attention, but let me badmouth you first so I can feel better about you. When you get to that point where you're like, okay, people don't bother me, they're going to say stuff. I might not react, I might look at it for a minute, contemplate what it is, think about it, but it's not gonna phase me because it's not true. So when you get to that point where you're like, okay, that's not true, that's what you think. So ultimately, it's what you think, it's not what I think. And when you get to that point, then you realize that people will say things and do things that it doesn't really matter. So when you get to that point that half of the stuff that people say doesn't even matter, has no volume in the weight of the world of what's going on in the moment, or even what's going on in general, it's just hogwash or horseshit. When you get to that point, then you're like, somebody says something, okay, I don't like that. I don't have to agree, but I don't need to take ownership of that, what they said. Because somebody will say something like, you're the ugliest, blah, 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 I've ever seen. Okay, thank you. Or, I don't like you because of da 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 da. And you're like, okay, that's nice. Have a nice day. When you get to that point, like example, like we'll say you come home from work, you're tired because you worked an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day or a 12-hour day or even a 24-hour day, whatever occupation you're doing, and you're like, I'm tired. And your spouse or your mother or whoever's living with you is like, you're a blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay. What's the reasoning behind what you're saying? Like, are you just trying to, like, get my goat? Or are you trying to agitate me because you're agitated from whatever's going on at the moment? It just makes you reflect on, okay, everybody's having a moment, and people say things that are really fucked up, and then you look at the reasoning behind it later. They don't like you. So they say they don't like you because the reasoning is they don't like themselves. So when people don't like themselves, they gang up with a bunch of other people that don't like themselves, and then they start saying things to you. And when you get to that point where you're like, okay, this person doesn't like themselves, so they're going to say things to me, so I don't like myself. Like, it's kind of a stupid behavior if you think about it. But if that was how you were raised and you don't know any other way, then you're going to do that. But when you get to the point where you're like, okay, I did some therapy, I did some things that are different than what I was shown, I don't need to continue that pattern. I don't need to continue that cycle of what I was shown. Because every time you get triggered on something, it's a reflection of something that you need to release or something that you need to look at. And when you get to that point and you're like, okay, so I need to release these things, I need to re embody a different idea of what I deserve or what I think. And then when you get to a point where you're like, okay, so the one thing I want in this world is love. Like that trumps everything. That trumps millions of dollars. That trumps the Ferraris and the airplanes and the lavish vacations and the travel and all that stuff. Like love. It's the most important thing. Then you're at peace with what's going on, because when you know that you're loved, people are going to hate you. That's okay. Because there's always going to be both. You're always going to get loved and you're always going to get hated. But if you know the reason why people hate you, there's a lot of factors in it, but mostly they're jealous of who you are or where you came from or how you react to things. And that's why people get triggered or angry or traumatized or whatever, because there's something that happened to them when they were little and they never resolved it. And as an adult, they buried it and they thought, okay. And then when it comes up as an adult and you're like, whoa, like I just got hit with a ton of bricks because something happened to me when I was this age and I didn't know how to react to it. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to process it at the time. Now it's different because you're just like, okay, I feel that. It doesn't feel nice, but I take ownership of that and I move on. And I would never do that to another human being. But when you're aware of things, certain things happen, you're like, okay, that doesn't feel good. I don't like this. But that memory or that moment can flee.